We're on the same
When I
side.
woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Nothing about the past, nothing about the future.
What's up? We're back at Draftvice, and I've got a good old friend, Shane.
What's up, everyone?
And today, you guys must miss this guy. We had to get a hot guy on the podcast, right? We can't have 30 gingers on the podcast. You have to change the opacity on your computer. So I got a good-looking guy, a little bit less, not ginger, and also, not as white, just slightly less white, 1% less white. So we have him on today. We're talking about the Bears and the Arizona Cardinals. And also, if you want to follow the podcast, you can follow it at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram, and you can follow Shane at
the_Shane_MCM on Instagram. Same thing on Twitter.
and you can follow me at Brojo Death Punch. So man. Also, there's been some news, right? So we're talking about these teams. Prince Amukamara and Taylor Gabriel just got released.
From the Bears.
From the Bears, that's right. We should probably remind everybody they're on the Bears, or were on the Bears.
Yep.
Now they're free agents. And they signed Demetrius Harris, the tight end from, he was on Cleveland and Kansas City Chiefs. Well, all right, their tight end situation's not totally set either, I guess. But, so we'll start out with the Bears since we had some information on the Bears. The Bears, it's kind of a weird situation, right? They don't have a first-round pick. They kind of underperformed last year. Trubisky doesn't look like he's taken a step forward. Although he played a little bit better towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that was more and so of scheme. And, there is offensive talent on there.
Well, Anthony Miller showed up a little bit more towards the end. Allen Robinson. Oh, my God. Allen Robinson, towards the end of this year, started looking like Allen Robinson of old.
Right.
He looked like he had the zip that he needed to. Last year, he looked like he was coming off the ACL. Didn't look like the guy that we always liked watching. He now looks like Allen Robinson. Problem is, he's got Mitch Trubisky throwing him the ball.
After he had Blake Bortles throwing him the ball in Jacksonville.
Dude, he's just gonna be look at all my bad quarterbacks I've got to work with. Now all of a sudden he's gonna hopefully he gets somebody who's moderately okay. Who? So here's the real question. They're clearly not going to fully move on from Trubisky. What do you think the idea is they're going to go with the quarterback? Are they going to do pick up a Mariota?
In terms of because every other free agent quarterback is somebody that I think could start right away at a franchise.
Yeah.
So Mariota's the only one who's kind of on the fence. Because if they get Dalton and don't start Dalton,
why'd you trade for him?
Right. They're not, you're not going to trade for Cam Newton without starting Cam Newton. So I don't know. They're such a weird team. I think the reason they're sticking with Trubisky so much is because their GM, Ryan Pace, I think he drafted him second overall. So it's his ego won't allow him to admit his fault.
Yeah, and also I get so that's the thing. That's Arizona. We saw Arizona. You don't have to make a commitment to a quarterback when you draft him in the first round. So this is somebody sticking with somebody that, hey, this is our guy. And I get the idea of wanting to see it through, but this is where the benefit of getting a guy like Mariota comes in, right? A guy who actually kind of fits that offense really well. I would like to see him with Matt Nagy. Maybe you'd see him take a step forward with a true because Nagy also kind of covered up a lot of the warts with Trubisky,
right?
A year ago, and then this year when they realized we have to do certain things with Trubisky.
They also got rid of their offensive coordinator, who was actually Mariota's second coach in college. From Oregon, they just fired him though, so I don't know who their new OC is off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know if they've hired.
But it doesn't really matter because the offensive coordinator there is kind of more like just a quality control guy because they're not calling plays.
Yeah, it's Matt Nagy calling plays. Oh, they did hire DiFilippo to be the QB coach.
Right, but he's been a good
QB coach. He hasn't really been. He's been kind of hit or miss with being an OC.
Yeah.
He
fired from Minnesota, fired from Jacksonville. Jacksonville, he went through kind of like a plague.
Yeah,
with
you have
injuries.
Nick Foles, and then you had Gardner Minshew, who actually, again, I know you're the big Minshew fan.
I love Minshew,
and I'm actually, I'm a big fan of him as well. Although not as big as Shane is. Shane has the T-shirt and everything, and he even grew the mustache out at one point.
Try to.
And so we saw what he did with Minshew. I think the problem was they got off of Minshew, then they brought him back. Jacksonville was a mess no matter what they were doing last year. But I thought DiFilippo did okay as an OC for them. So I think this is another step to, hey, you know what? At least I'm going to refurbish a little bit of my career. I could stay in the NFL. and become a QB coach. And he's done well as a QB coach. We saw him be good when he was with Philadelphia. We saw what he did with Minshew. So
he wasn't bad in Cleveland either when he was there.
Exactly. Sometimes being an OC is a little bit different. I mean, it's a lot different. You're making the play calls. You're looking at the game situation. When you're the QB coach, you're working on footwork and passing and reading the scheme. Although they do a lot of times have input into
line checks, blocking shifts, things like that. That's what quarterback coaches go over, and that's a lot of what Trubisky has struggled with.
Yeah.
Because he looks at his primary read too much. He has a hard time reading defenses. He has a hard time changing blocks at the line. They really didn't give him a lot of control at the line. They didn't give him much to check to because he has such a difficult time reading that. And that's something that comes from coaching and experience, which he's had bad of one and not a lot of the other. So,
yeah. So I think with the Trubisky thing, they got to kind of figure out what they're doing with him. Hopefully, DiFilippo helps him take a step forward. Another one who, again, talking about different quarterbacks, again, like you were saying, all the other ones that you have options outside of Mariota, you're right. They're harder to. If you're picking them, you're sticking with them and you want to play them. So we've already aborted on you.
Right. It's so coincidental too, because if they do bring in somebody, because one knock that Tennessee always got when Mariota was a starter, they never brought in a competent backup to push him in practice, which they thought he needed. And when they brought in Tannehill had the job, I think, by halftime of week 6. So it's almost like whoever they bring in to Chicago, if it's a competent quarterback, it's going to create a controversy right away, especially if Trubisky starts playing subpar again.
Also, Mariota, forget the knocks on him. So he's actually a really big leader in that. When he was on the Tennessee Titans, he was a big leader in that locker room. Even after they had the loss in the playoffs, he went up to Tannehill and said, man, you're going to be back here again. Don't worry about it. You still got this. So for somebody who lost their job to somebody and go up to somebody and be like, you know what, man, and saw that person lose a playoff game and be like, dude, you still got it. You'll be back here. Don't worry about it.
He'd been
that
doing
shows
it
great leadership.
All season long. They were saying he would come, he would help Tannehill watch tape. They would break down the defenses together, do whatever he could for him. He's actually credited with how well he mimicked Lamar Jackson in practice leading up to the Ravens game where they upset them in the divisional round. So it's just the system never fit him. The coaching, there was no continuity for him. Different OC or a quarterback's coach or even a head coach every year. By the time they got him receiving talent, the offensive line regressed. It was injury plagued. It was just one of those times, some things just aren't meant to work, like relationships, really. So I
think he would be a great fit there. In Chicago, could probably use somebody like him, and I actually would love to see him with Nagy.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Because he does fit the Andy Reid kind of. I would like to see him with a lot of different coaches. McVay, Belichick, obviously, because McDaniel's scheme fits him. But I think, Chicago's a good fit. I don't know if he wants to go to the cold weather.
Yeah.
And a little under the radar story about him because he doesn't publicly address it, but his dad's really sick. So, and of course he's from Hawaii, so he's trying to get back closer to home. But
off topic, but it's somewhat related too, is also from Hawaii, and they just kind of had a comment about preferring not to be in Detroit if Detroit was to pick him.
Yeah, his family doesn't want him to go there.
It makes sense. Again, another, somebody who, you're close to somebody. You don't want to be in the middle of, the NFC North, which is a much further flight. You're not used to that weather. You're probably not a big fan of it. So if he did want to have his family nearby or bring them in, it depends on how committed you are and how many other opportunities you have as far as both Mariota and Tua.
Well, I mean, not only that, but this is definitely off topic, but Miami, however bad their record may have been last year, it's still clear this is a team that is intent on winning and setting up for winning.
And they improved a lot. 5 wins with that roster? Mm-hmm. First off, Brian Flores, man, that guy deserved Coach of the Year from that shit. And then they have all these assets. Again, we'll save another episode for all we could do on Miami.
And then Detroit, clearly, that team's a mess.
Yeah, it looks like a lame duck situation over there. Back to the Bears, though.
Because they're kind of following in the same footprint. This is a team that has so much they need to fix.
Ooh.
Yet they're also in a win now type mode too. And it's like you can't be in rebuild and win now.
Yeah, Giants made that mistake a few years ago. Literally all the way up till now even. That's a team that everybody was expecting the defense to bounce back and be the same as it was before. They had Khalil Mack, they had Akeem Hicks, they had Leonard Floyd, but they lost a major piece, which was Vic Fangio, and they had injuries, right? That's the other thing. I think offensively, if they figure out the quarterback situation, they're relatively good. A lot of good receivers. Even though they got rid of Taylor Gabriel, they still have Anthony Miller. They have Allen Robinson. The O-line's been it wasn't great last year. It was better the year before.
Just lost Long as well.
And, yes, he retired. And now we also have, I kind of like the running back there.
Montgomery Cohen.
Yeah. Yeah, I like both those guys. Cohen's just he's like a little joystick. You just go ahead and throw him out of the backfield. They've run him out of the slot before. I think that's kind of why they felt okay getting rid of Taylor Gabriel. Montgomery, I know they got rid of Jordan Howard and they brought in Montgomery because they thought he fit the scheme a little bit more.
He failed to meet expectations, though.
Yeah, and I think part of that was the offensive line. Again, they took a step back.
Well, not just that, but it's like the quarterback was Mitchell Trubisky. So they would stack the box and they say, okay, beat us with your arm. You know?
And they weren't utilizing Trubisky the way, and also we saw at the end of the year, Montgomery did have some good games. So,
that was when the passing game picked up too a little bit.
Yeah. So when they were like, we're gonna run, they did a lot more I formation. I just remember watching some of those games. Like, wow, they decided to start running Montgomery a lot, and I remember watching one game. They were down at the red zone. They couldn't get it in for like half the game. They would be down in the red zone. They'd be running out of the shotgun. They'd be doing all this. And this is the one thing I think I kind of like with Nagy. He adapted halfway through the game. And you're like, oh, let's run out of the I formation, right? And they ran out of the I formation at the goal line. They got it in the end zone because we were blocking everybody. And, we're not the worst run blockers in the world. So, and it depends. Everything's scheme specific, but at least he showed the ability to adapt and try something new in game. So I appreciated that from Nagy. I think Nagy, the comparison to the Detroit Lions is very right too. That this could be a lame duck situation. This could be very volatile. All these guys might be out by the end of next year.
Yeah. If they can't admit that they messed up and that they need to fix it, then it's going to cause, because that's always the downfall of a coaching staff and a team is they refuse to change their course until it's too late. You know, and then you're hitting that iceberg, and it's like that was one. The Chicago's defense was still good this year, but
took a couple of steps back. It was easier to pass on them. Their corners,
right? Well, because Hicks got hurt, which didn't help. Mukamura digressed because he's old.
Yeah, he's he's going to be filing for retirement instead of going to another team. Probably. Actually, he'll probably end up with the Denver Broncos because that's where Fangio went.
Clinton Dix did not play as well as Amos did. Eddie Jackson wasn't as dynamic as he was a year ago, but also goes back to the offense. The offense couldn't stay on the field long enough for them to get a break. You get worn out after a while, like game after game after game. If you're always on the field, it's gonna beat you down. Yeah.
So, and Pagano coming in, trying to implement somewhat of what Fangio did, but not doing a full overhaul to his defense, even though his defense is a little bit similar. Comes from that Baltimore kind of defensive style where they prefer a lot of man coverage. Fangio actually is a little bit more mixed of both of zone and man, and likes a lot of good matchup zone corners and utilizes the safeties really well. So I think that switch to D coordinator didn't help either.
No.
I think that kind of hurt him. Again, you're right. Hicks, we both mentioned it. He was injured. When everybody's able to just stop Khalil Mack, because Leonard Floyd had a weird he's just not progressed as well either.
No.
And the real question here is, what do they do in free agency? They don't have a lot of money. They're towards the end of they're in the 20s as far as cap space. The teams that behind them in cap space are the ones you go, oh my god, they're horrible in cap space. They're right before that. They're like, all right, but what are you gonna do? How are you fixing this problem, right? You're probably not getting an offensive tackle.
No.
Also, no first round pick, 2 second round picks. So draft wise, they're in a weird situation. Cap space wise, they're in a weird situation. You hope Hicks comes back, he's healthy. He's another guy they could cut if they didn't believe in him.
Or restructure his salary.
Yeah.
I think they're going to get rid of Trevathan, to be honest.
Well, he's already walking in free agency.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's, again, you're losing pieces to this defense that brought you to the playoffs, that made people think you were a Super Bowl contender. So if you're not able to retool and fix that up, you got to find some other replacements. Good thing is good defensive line free agency time. Like there's a lot of guys who are gonna, you're gonna get discounts on some guys, right?
Right.
I don't think they're gonna get like somebody big like an Armistead or a Chris Jones, who at least one of those two guys are probably gonna be franchise tagged. But they might get somebody along the lines of maybe they get Sue on a cheap deal.
If he wants to go there,
Well, if they say, again, it comes down to A, money, and B, opportunity. And, he might go, we saw Sue both years kind of wait it out and be like, I'm going to go to the place I feel most comfortable. I feel like I have a shot. You're right. If you might not want to go there, given that it's Chicago. Although, if you get business ties out of it, that's another thing that he's been very big on, is if he can get some kind of business aspect out of it, he might do it.
He's also in nice weather with no state taxes right now.
Yeah, he probably want to return to a Florida team or a Cali team or a New York team, places where you feel he can get a lot of business or good weather, a lot of money. Like you said, the tax situation in Florida is really good. So even if he went to another Florida team, he might want to do that. Although he's running out of Florida teams. He's basically got
only one left.
Yeah, he's got either stay on Tampa Bay or go to Jacksonville. I don't think he wants to go back to Miami. Going forward, it's going to be weird. Also, their corner situation, getting rid of Amukamara, you're hopefully going to find people who fit what Pagano wants to do.
Right.
He's been more in the past, very man heavy. Fuller played well last year. He wasn't that bad.
But they're not going to have the money for like a Garrett Bradbury or what's his name from Carolina? Bradbury from Carolina.
Yeah, they're not going to have the money for him, and he also fit more of what Fangio ran a lot of the time. A lot more zone heavy concepts. They might have to take a lot of maybe a Morris Claiborne guy who's kind of like older, but an opportunity because he played pretty well in man coverage. It depends. It depends on how they're going to go ahead and run this scheme. If they're going to adapt more, if they're going to try to go stick to a more zone heavy scheme again. Maybe some mix and match. It comes down to that D line, because that was the front force of that defense. That defense was that defensive line was just scary.
I could see them maybe because Tony Jefferson just got cut by Baltimore. They could probably pick him up at safety, get rid of Dix for have Jefferson on a cheaper contract.
Yeah, and he's also a free. He's a free agent too. Haha.
Yeah.
Also, two different safety spots. Tony Jefferson was more of a strong safety. Whereas Haha was more of a free safety player
who was not good in coverage, but good in the box.
Yeah, but also it comes down to how you want. If you're playing a lot more cover 2 or 2 high man, you might get away with it more because Jefferson played a lot in a 2 cover 2 system when he was in Baltimore, and 2-man system in Baltimore. This year they changed it up a lot. But in previous years, he seemed to fit those kind of schemes very well. So it depends on what they're doing going forward. Pagano kind of leaned towards the 2-man system when he was in Indianapolis.
They don't have a first-round pick. They do have a second-round pick. You could still get a really good corner.
This is going to be a good draft for corner.
Yeah, but it's also so loaded with there's 6 quarterbacks that could be taken in the first 2 rounds, maybe 9 wide receivers. There's 4 offensive linemen that are definitely going to go in the first round, barring injury or something. So it's like you're still going to get a good corner. You're not going to get Okuda or like
Fulton. You're probably not getting unless you're trading up. You might get
you're not going to get Delpit in the second round.
You're not getting that strong safety. That actually he's great at free safety, but you're not getting that kind of a safety. Second round you might get an Xavier McKinney if he falls out of the first round. There's a corner, Jeff Gladney, a good pickup. There's Arnett, who has a couple of red flag, off the field. I don't know if it's red flag. I don't. You might want to say orange flag. I don't personally know the deal.
Who's the one from Florida? UF. That's coming out. He's considered the 3rd best one.
Is that Gladney or is that?
It might be Gladney.
Because Gladney's good. And he's probably the 3rd best corner. If you're going for strictly man corner, you can go with Henderson. Again, Fulton's going to be good, but Fulton you're probably not getting him. There's going to be a corner that probably falls to that second round range where they can get him and probably get some real production out of the guy. Again, that's probably where I would go with it. If you're looking to fix offensive line, there's going to be a lot of interesting offensive linemen in this draft. Outside, you're talking about the top 4 guys. There's guys like Niang, who's coming out. Is that the one that's out? There's Prince Tango Wahoo out of Tango. I can't pronounce that guy's name.
Yeah, you're close.
Prince Tango something. Foxtrot. I think he's the one that's coming out of Auburn. There's 2 guys coming out of Auburn who are good.
Thomas Thomas.
I don't think they're going to get Thomas.
No,
Andrew Thomas is going to be going in the first round. He's actually, I think personally, he's my second favorite. Him and Wills.
Jedrick Wills is the best.
Yeah.
Mekhi Becton has so much potential, but he also has the biggest floor, I feel like, too.
Yeah, because, oh my God, he looks like a giant bear, but the problem is he doesn't take a lot of pro pass sets. And then there's Wirfs out of Iowa.
Yeah, Tristan Wirfs.
Who I think might, I think if you played him at guard, he's an all-pro guard. I think you got to try him at tackle and see what you can get out of him because he's played well in college. He had some problems holding up to some rushers, but I think he's also another big one. I think if you played a guard, you'd automatically be getting an all-pro guard, though.
I just think
like a Zach Martin type.
This is what kills me about Chicago. And, like, if you're a Bears fan, I'm sorry. I don't have anything against the team. I really don't. But it's like, if you look at the positions that are the scariest, it's quarterback, offensive line, defensive back, and it's like those are 3 of the top 5 most important, if not the most important that you need.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you fix it in the draft? They don't have a first-round pick. Free agency, they don't have a lot of cap space. It's just, and it's a scary situation to be in, and it's going to be interesting to see what they try to do, whether if they try to trade some people, pick up some people, if they. Like if you get a Bleach Report notification saying they released someone and it shocks the hell out of you, like I would not be surprised. But they got a lot of work to do, and it's not a lot to work with to fix it.
Yeah, I mean they do have a couple of more guys they could release if they wanted to free up some space. They got Leonard Floyd and they have Cordell Patterson.
They should get rid of Trey Burton, if I'm being honest. That's a big.
His contract's still a little. I think it's got too much guaranteed on it.
Goodness.
Or it might be the It's also, signing bonus. He was only signed last year, so he probably has some money still left in the signing bonus as well.
I don't know if anybody would need him in a trade, but he's just.
Yeah, you'd have to find a team wanting to buy him.
Yeah, they're paying.
That's a hard one to do.
I mean, his agent could always be like, oh, well, it's Trubisky, throw into him, but it's always like I don't know. They're paying him a lot of money to do a whole lot of nothing.
He's been injured a lot, too. And that's the thing is somebody buying into that. Either you might want to have to do like almost kind of like that what a couple of teams have done last year with Miami, where you're basically doing a cap dump and you're paying up in like picks. So maybe trade him to a team that's willing to take on the contract and say, okay, like you're going to still take a little bit of a hit, but you're losing out on the guaranteed money. But it still has to be a team that's somewhat interested in that. And again, you're giving up more caps. You're giving up more picks, which is not what they need to do. They need more picks. They also need to fill out this roster. This was the big worry with the Khalil Mack trade is you got rid of 2 first-round picks. You're not refilling the roster up a lot. So I think cornerback they might be able to fix in free agency. There's a lot of guys at corner. I don't think they're going to get any of like the major pass rushers. There's going to be a few D tackles they might be able to grab.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like they don't have the money for that.
Yeah, this is going to be a team that they're going to have to try and do like free agent budget style. Be like, hey, we got to find some dudes, kind of turn over the, maybe a Jabal Sheard, but Jabal Sheard's going to be expensive too. A lot of guys are going to be tough to get this year. And they also have to convince them to want to play for Chicago. Because again, this is free agency. This isn't the draft. They're not going to be able to just wander in and be like, hey, we want you, sir.
Oh yeah, because the head coach he said some things at the podium that rubbed people the wrong way, but it's like, do you have an identity? And like, what is it? Because Trubisky isn't working out. The running game took way too long to get going. It's like, do you really want to stick to Trubisky? Are you a tough defensive team with a power running game that isn't working, or it's like I don't know which way they're trying to go.
They need an identity. They need an identity on defense and on offense. It looked like, Matt Nagy's good at scheming up plays. He's very good at scheming things up in the beginning. But, again, this all comes back to Trubisky at the end. Like, for the offense, it comes back to Trubisky and Nagy willing to really go ahead and make a commitment or find a way to work around him.
I don't think it's Nagy. I think it's Pace, because if you look,
Nagy, yes, Pace has probably been the biggest dunderhead of the whole lot.
Yeah, because Nagy has pulled him for an injury.
Yeah.
And benched him for an injury. Like, if you're starting Chase Daniel, that's kind of letting you know, like, where you're at on the Mitchell Trubisky
He's
train.
another one going in free agency, too.
Well,
I mean clearly, because they're going to probably look for another quarterback who's going to be a little bit more potential at being a starter.
That's like saying Blaine Gabbert's leaving. It's not a big loss.
I think Blaine Gabbert is leaving Tampa, too. That's a whole other episode. But, so Chicago, get your shit together. That's kind of basically where we're at. I think it's time we move on from Chicago.
Sorry,
Bears
fans.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm not hating on your team. I like a lot of the players. I'm just being real.
It's a very interestingly talented team. I like a lot of guys on it too. It's just losing Fangio didn't help either.
No.
I think that he was a good portion. Why I think he was the reason why Eddie Jackson had that great year.
Yeah, a lot of it was a lot of things went so well for that defense, and it's just I like Bear fans. They're some of my favorite in the NFL, so I do feel bad for them.
They're very loyal. They're kind of nice fans. Like I've never dealt. Like I think they're definitely in the top half of the league in fandom.
Yeah, and I don't know, but they'll talk football too. They'll talk legit football with you too. So that's what I love about Bears fans. So I feel bad like saying mean things about the team, but I'm just being real.
Here's a team I don't have a problem saying mean things about. Actually, I don't know if I really have a problem saying mean things about them. But we're gonna move south. We're gonna go warmer. We're going to Arizona, everybody.
Yeah, all 17 of their fans.
Yeah. Well, and they all live in Arizona, so at least they're like, well, all right, it's hot, so there's that.
I should wash my mouth because I moved to Phoenix this summer. They might jump me.
Yeah. They'll be like, oh, I heard you did that podcast with that guy from Jersey. I'm doing an Anthony Quinn voice. You remember him from the podcast a while ago. But this is a team that has a lot of interesting players. It's Cardinals. They got Kyler Murray, right? This is I think the one thing I liked about them, right? That they saw that their team was not going in a good direction last year, and they said, "All right, we're going to retool everything." They went ahead and they went big, right? They went for the college coordinator, now going to be an NFL head coach in Cliff Kingsbury. They got rid of their quarterback who they drafted in the first round a year before, and they got Kyler Murray, who. Honestly, I liked what I saw from Kyler Murray this year.
No, I was a big fan. He should not have been Offensive Rookie of the Year like he was awarded, but he was very good.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue.
I just had to throw that out
awards
there.
are just horrible.
Yeah.
They never get anything right. Like head coach of the year should always be almost Bill Belichick or Andy Reid.
Right.
Or
I mean, Harbaugh wasn't a bad one.
That was a good one.
Lamar wasn't a bad MVP. Michael Thomas wasn't a bad offensive player. It was just I don't know. There was at least two other rookies I think deserved it more than Kyler, but because he was the first overall pick and a quarterback, you got a lot of things that give you an advantage.
Yeah.
Winning it.
So again, Kyler showed the athleticism a lot. Honestly, made that O-line look a little bit better because of the
showed confidence a lot too.
Well, honestly, I think the biggest problem with that offense wasn't Kyler. It was A, it was the O-line. B, I think part of it. There's things I liked about Cliff Kingsbury, and there's things I didn't like. And he never really let it go. He never said, all right, just throw the ball deep. Because, dude, when Kyler had to throw a deep ball, it was, amazing.
He's got an arm.
He's got an arm. He's got a very accurate arm. He's got great arm strength. He has no problem throwing on the move. I mean, if he had a better O-line, if he had a little bit different of a... and he fits the scheme really well. They did a lot of... short passes, a lot of horizontal outs. It was a horizontal passing game,
right?
And there's good and bad to that, right? If it's strictly horizontal, you're not pushing it down the field. Well,
no, that's that West Coast Bill Walsh style offense.
It had some of those elements. They were the things I liked that Kingsbury did, right? He did a lot of 4 wide sometimes. He mixed it up so much. He would do 2 tight ends.
They used 10 personnel more than any team in the NFL this year.
Yeah,
that means 1 running back, 0 tight ends for people who don't know.
Yeah. And again, that made the 4 wide receiver set kind of spreads out the defense, and it worked for a bit. And then they tweaked it. They would change it up 3 or 4 weeks in. That's something that you don't a lot of teams you see this especially with the Rams where they stick with the same personnel and they're doing 11 personnel the whole game. You get a lot of teams that stick to a certain personnel group and they just love it. And I get it. Sometimes teams like doing that. You heard this was Zach Taylor of the Bengals last year, which might be why they didn't do great last year. Was they just kept on running 11 personnel all the time, and if it's not working.
Yeah, especially if you have a bad offensive line, you can't run too much from 11, which both the Rams and the Bengals did. You have to switch to more 21, or even 12.
Yeah, and you either utilizing well, in this situation, right? You didn't have a lot of pass blockers from the tight ends, but because everybody's so spread out, you had to worry about them being able to throw to first off Kenyon Drake, that trade last year,
huge pickup,
and he ended up looking amazing. It's everybody saw that and they went, "What was going on in Miami, man?"
He is one of many people that improved after the departure of Adam Gase.
Oh, yeah.
Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry, Ryan Tannehill, Kenyon Drake, Gesicki, just a bunch of people played so much better when they weren't attached to Adam Gase.
Yes.
So.
This is a team that drafted a lot of receivers last year, and we saw Andy Isabella get a little bit of play, right?
Which it never made sense to me because he just did not fit it. I don't think he fits the scheme very well. He'd be better in like a...
Well, they run a lot of two slots. So we saw Christian Kirk play well last year, right?
Finally.
And we saw Larry Fitzgerald be Larry Fitzgerald, still good at what he's doing, kind of like almost like a slim tight end but good receiver guy.
He's more there, too, for like locker room because
Yeah.
this is such a young team and with a new head coach that's never coached in the NFL. So he's there... He's kind of there to just be like the uncle to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, and they need that.
So I like what I saw from some of the receivers. Andy Isabella, we didn't really see much of. When he finally got to go down the field, when he wasn't being pressed, when they were running that 4 wide, or he was running out of the slot and he's not getting... The problem with Andy Isabella is he really can't hold up when he's being pressed, which, I mean, you're in the NFL. It's going to happen a bunch.
Yeah.
So he can't play outside, right? He's not really that quick slot receiver like a Jarvis Landry where he's going to be running a lot of horizontal routes. Or how people thought Paris
Beasley.
Campbell was going to be, or Beasley, yeah. He's got a very specific role. He's like a deep slot receiver. You got to run him out of the slot. You got to run him like a Ted Ginn kind of guy,
or like
Ted Ginn,
or even the dude for the Rams, not Kupp, Reynolds.
Yeah,
Reynolds is a deep slot guy.
Yeah, so again, like you get a lot of like for him. There's very little you can do with him. And if you're going to keep doing these, like you're saying, the scheme with horizontal routes all the time, that's not what he does best. He does best going down the field. And they took Andy Isabella ahead of quite a few good receivers, too.
They took him over DK.
DK, Terry McLaurin, and a guy who they also drafted in the 4th round, Hakeem Butler, who we didn't see anything of. He was just MIA.
He went on the injured reserve before the season started.
Yeah.
He broke his hand, I think.
But he was never designated to return either, right? So that, when you're not getting to see that guy play, Christian Kirk, I like what I saw from him. You remember Chan Gailey? He's now back with Miami, everybody, but he was with the Jets and he was with
coached the Cowboys for a while.
Yeah, he was with the Bills for a little bit too. When he's done, it kind of reminded me a little bit of his offense, right? Where they had, except they don't have big, like they kind of like Kirk's decent size. Fitzgerald's a good sized receiver. He would do a lot of the same things that they were doing down in Arizona, where you have these big slot guys. You're able to throw the ball and let them get a couple of yards and get a first down. It's that team. They needed to get more out of their receivers. I think DK Metcalf would have been an amazing pickup for them instead of Andy Isabella
or even Brown.
Well, Malcolm Brown was much higher. That was like
no.
Oh.
AJ.
Oh, AJ Brown. Well, I think he was still even higher too. He was like top 50 pick. They took this guy like towards the end of the 2nd round. But you're right, AJ Brown too, man. He did great this year. Last year's wide receiver class was amazing.
I think this upcoming one's gonna be good too.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be beautiful.
And a lot of people have, for some reason, so since they re-signed Humphreys, their left tackle. Yeah, kind of it was kind of like a pointer to a lot of people. Okay, so we kind of see them sticking with this O-line. They're probably not going to draft an O-lineman in the 1st round. A lot of people think they're going to draft another receiver.
Yes, like a CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb and Judy are the two I see the most.
Yeah, that 1st round spot. Or so
I think they pick 8th, 7th or 8th.
Yeah, they pick 8th. They pick ahead of
you guys and right before.
Is it 7th is Carolina, 6th is the Chargers?
Yeah.
Oh, Jacksonville. Yeah. So, yeah, I get the reasoning behind that. Although, granted, you need 5 starters on the offensive line. I think, but left tackle. Okay, so they don't really need a left tackle. A lot of these tackles in this year's draft play right tackle as well.
And I think a lot of them are going to be switched to guard by the time they get to the NFL anyway.
Yeah, Andrew Thomas and Wirfs have a very good fit for guard. I still think Andrew Thomas is a good left tackle, though. I'm still interested in playing Wirfs at tackle before I switch him to guard. That, to me, makes no sense. Like, you got a guy here who could probably play tackle. Try him at tackle. And he's played a lot of right tackle. Wills, has played exclusively, I think, on the right side. And I think Thomas has played both guard and tackle. I don't remember if he played right I know he played left tackle while he was at but either way. So we got a bunch of these tackles in there. They could still take a guard or a tackle, but you're right. There's also been that connection of CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. If they trade down or they get somebody in the 2nd round, they can get maybe – I know Ruggs is later in the 1st probably. Second round. I honestly think T. Higgins might fall the second round. He fits very much the Larry Fitzgerald role.
T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, they might take. 'Cause
Yes.
he's so explosive. With the routes that they have, you don't have to be a pristine route runner to fit that system, which is why somebody like Higgins and Ayuk would be good. CeeDee Lamb, there's a lot of questions about his speed because so much of his stuff was either shallow or crossing routes, not a lot of deep stuff.
Yeah.
So people want to really see him at the combine to see how he runs, things like that. Jerry Jeudy has been the number one receiver in this draft class for the last 2 years. And unless he,
Although people have been putting CeeDee Lamb ahead of him, I think
it's
what
close.
Judy,
They're just so different.
yeah, I think what Judy has, I can trust more the speed and the route running. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's still a good route runner, and just his ability to get off the line of scrimmage, he's a monster.
Yeah,
he will just shove you. He don't give a fuck. It reminds me of DK Metcalf last year. He kind of actually reminds me a lot, and I know he's getting a lot of these comps. This is the DeAndre Hopkins comp. He's not necessarily the burner, but he'll outmuscle you. He'll shove you.
He'll get open too. And
so
then Jerry Jeudy, he gets a lot of like Sammy Watkins at Clemson comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
Not Sammy Watkins in the pros, but like he's good, man. He's fast.
Well, he's in that same phylum of receiver of like Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley. They like that the good route runner, but also fast, especially with Cooper. He might not have. I kind of am curious to see what, just because I mentioned Ridley and Cooper, what his vertical is going to be. Not because I actually care, but because I feel like it's going to be made a big deal about. But he's going to get those comps as well.
And because he's from Alabama.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a team that offensively probably still need to build up. They're losing a couple of tackles. They're losing Marcus Gilbert, who they traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers for. He plays right tackle. He didn't really play much last year either. He was injured. Sweezy.
He's old though, man.
Yeah, Sweezy. Honestly, I think Sweezy's the one they can just get rid of at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They still have Pugh, who's on a easy to afford contract. AQ Shipley's walking.
I love Shipley though.
Yeah, I just don't see them keeping him. Again, like if you can find a center, it's a good draft for a second round center. It's not like there's not a top end center, but there's a lot of interesting guys. So if you're looking to grab a guy in the second round, like a Ruiz, like a Cushenberry, guys who are solid guys who can probably start year one, and they're probably going to be there in the second round when you draft. I think those guys are interesting to go ahead and grab because again, Shipley's getting older. I know they had Mason Cole, played okay, but I don't know if I even saw him play this year. I saw him play a lot more last year. It's going to be for them. Again, they still need to fix that O-line. But I think the way they look at it is the Russell Wilson scenario, right?
Yeah.
This is why you have a mobile quarterback. So they might not care about fixing the O-line. They might say, listen, we think our biggest problems are offense and defense, or our receiver and then defense. Get a guy who can maybe get on the outside and work from the slot as well, like a Jerry Jeudy or a CeeDee Lamb, because CeeDee Lamb could play anywhere along any part of the receiver formation, X, Y, Z. You probably could, you play him out of the slot, you get him a free release. He's playing X. We saw it with DK Metcalf. He's probably like a slower DK Metcalf in that regard, with more vertical and more like horizontal ability.
Right. And if you watch Kyler play too, like he'll just fall down or slide before the defender gets to him, so he doesn't have to take that hit. It's not like Russell, who
also built-in chemistry. Which I think it's might be a little underrated, might be a little overrated too sometimes. But that built-in chemistry with CeeDee Lamb, he played with him at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So that might be another aspect to it that I think might get him a little bit of a boost. Their defense played a bit better towards the end of the year. They when they got Patrick Peterson back, they were able to kind of like slide a little bit of coverage over to Byron Murphy. I'm still not a huge Vance Joseph fan. I think he's kind of fallen off when he doesn't have that kind of
Chandler Jones is still Chandler Jones.
Yeah, Chandler Jones, oh my God, man. He's just still consistently getting underrated for like being a great pass rusher, probably because he's been on the team he's been on.
Yeah.
Doesn't have that, and doesn't have that other person going ahead and taking away attention from him on that team. Hassan Reddick is a guy who I want to see like if he's going to take that step forward, or are they going to get rid of him? They were talking about trading him last year. He was drafted in the first round a few years ago while Arians was there. He's played okay at linebacker. Sometimes they've stuck him at edge. I don't know if he really fits Vance Joseph's scheme or system. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of Vance Joseph in the last few years. Maybe the second year in the scheme and the system helps out everybody. He does prefer those man corners. Maybe they get a guy like coming off of a late stage part of his career, like a Chris Harris, who could play really well in the slot. And then again, like when you're able to
Chris Harris is going to cost a lot of money.
We'll see. You know, I know he turned down $12 million last year, but sometimes when you hit the free agent market, you go, okay, maybe this isn't the best situation.
Logan
here.
Ryan's a free agent.
Logan Ryan. It's also a very deep corner free agent class.
Yeah.
So maybe they grab a guy like him. We talked about a couple of the corners in the draft already. Again, this team's major needs have been mostly. Oh, and then forget about the needs. David Johnson, that guy. Like, you know, they talk about, is it still the injury thing? Did he get injured again? People were talking about him being injured last year. This is why you probably don't overpay running backs and give them a lot of guaranteed money. He made it to, like, that's why Kenyon Drake's been such a big, find for them, right? And then now there's talk about them franchise tagging Kenyon Drake to keep him, which is kind of an interesting concept. You have this guy who, you traded for, you already overpaid one running back, and now you're going to pay another one.
Yeah, and they still have Chase Edmonds on the team, who in spurts was very good last year.
Yeah, so now you got now you're going to have three running backs that are all very good pass catchers, all very good in that scheme and system, except for David Johnson towards the end of the year, which was kind of hard to see. Is he going to bounce back? Are they just done with him? Are they going to trade him somewhere? There's been questions as to whether Tampa Bay is going to be willing to trade and get him.
Oh, because of the Arians connection?
Yeah, and he did get some usage out of him. They do kind of have a weird running back situation. They're losing Peyton Barber. They have Ronald Jones.
Sucks.
He was a good runner, but he can't catch. And if you want to, there's such a benefit to having a running back who can catch out of the backfield.
Who's the other one they have? Angunga Wale or whatever?
Oh, yeah. And that was the guy who they were playing on their third downs, catching out of the backfield. So that's a team that might be interested in shopping for a running back, but a lot of his money is also guaranteed, so they can't even cut him.
And it's a lot of money.
Yeah. So David Johnson's probably the guy who is kind of like the hook around the neck, and you're just kind of getting dragged down by him at this point. Unless, he bounces back next year, in which case you have two good pass-catching running backs. Maybe they could figure out a way to utilize these guys.
Yeah.
They have a decent amount of money in cap space, $50 million. You got to be careful about how you're utilizing that money. Again, are they going to sign other people? Are they going to sign another offensive lineman? Are they going to re-sign? Doesn't sound like they're going to re-sign Gilbert. So maybe are they going to try and fix the right tackle situation? Maybe get a Conklin, who I don't think really fits their offensive scheme.
No.
Maybe a Bulaga. If you're looking at the older end of the right tackle spectrum, those are the guys that you can look at as Bulaga and Conklin. A couple of guys in this draft I don't think are going to be able to play right away at right tackle. Josh Jones. We were talking before about Lucas Niang. Prince Tego Owa, I was saying before. There's also Jeff Wilson out of Auburn, another guy that's a good pickup in the draft. Might be there at some point. And again, this is a team that Patrick Peterson's getting old.
And he's not taking his fucking PEDs no more either.
Yeah, you might see that drop off without the steroids. So, are they going to look to maybe move him? He's got a kind of a light contract. If they want to trade or cut him, he might be objectionable to even playing. Like we talk, we've heard holdouts for the last 3 years about the guy. So, I'm not gonna play. I'm gonna hold out. Blah blah blah. Then ends up playing decently well last year. But again, when you're coming off the PEDs, is this going to be a thing like, if we pay him this year, is it going to be an Xavier Rhodes situation where you have a guy who's like a star corner, built like a brick shithouse, but then just takes a dive off?
Yeah, they lose their speed, they lose, the hip movement that they used to have, and it's...
Especially he's built a lot like Xavier Rhodes, so if you saw the drop off from that guy, you're looking at this guy, you're kind of going like...
he fell off a cliff. You're paying a guy to be a lockdown corner, but instead you're getting a liability, And he doesn't have the size to move to safety.
And like I was talking before about the tight end situation. There's like they like using the tight end sometimes. Like they had Charles Clay, Max Williams is a free agent. Are they going to re-sign him? Maybe go for a bigger name free agent, like maybe a Hunter Henry or an Austin Hooper from Atlanta. That's the one that sounds like he's going to be an actual free agent. If you're getting a guy like that who again kind of can make it helpful to mix up the scheme a little bit. you might. Again, the one thing I liked about Cliff Kingsbury, he didn't seem dedicated to doing one thing all the time.
No, once he realized that he needed to change things up, he made adjustments. He tried to stay. It was so weird because that system was supposed to be this new thing in the NFL, and it's supposed to be have ingenuity and things like that. But he still kept it very conservative for what it was.
Yes.
So. And that's part of it is because it is new and you have very young players, mainly the quarterback and skill players. So it's everybody's trying to learn it as he's trying to learn. And once he saw, the downfalls of it, he started making adjustments while still keeping the same system in place for, I was impressed with what he did because I was not a big believer in him when he came to the NFL.
No, neither was I. I mean, I think I made comments about it last year. And initially it looked like it was going to be a train wreck. Their first couple weeks, it did not. I mean, they managed to keep up with the Lions initially, but I didn't really believe in the Lions back then either. No. So
they did look good in the second half against Baltimore.
Yeah, they held up against the San Francisco 49ers twice.
Yeah.
That was impressive. There's things I saw about this team were impressive. I kind of want to see what goes forward with it. If people are going to start figuring them out, if they're even going to be able to figure them out, if they're going to figure themselves out, they're going to figure out this is what we need. We're going to fix this. And we're going to keep going forward.
Well, the year 2 for a quarterback is always the most analyzed.
Yeah, well, because either they get the tape on you and they figure out your tendencies, which does happen, especially for if the athletic quarterbacks who they think that the athletic quarterback has a weakness, they'll go after that more in the second year because now you get to look at the tape. On the other end, now you have a year in the NFL, you have chemistry, you have time in the system, especially here with Kyler Murray in Arizona. Time in the system, is used to being in the NFL, used to getting hit, used to kind of all right, reading some of these coverages. I'm actually kind of excited to see what happens with Kyler Murray next year. I think fantasy-wise, he's going to be a guy who everybody's going to start targeting. That's going to be like the Lamar Jackson last year kind of deal. I really started targeting him later in the drafts in the fantasy world. So I think he's the one that's it's going to be interesting. Let's see what happens here fantasy-wise for him. But Cardinals and Bears, man, interesting two teams, different reasons. Kind of one looks like the trajectory is going up, and the other one's looking down.
And even if it's not necessarily going up, you can tell that they're doing things and that their intentions are for it to go up.
Yes.
Whereas one team, it's our trajectory is to get to the playoffs, or our intentions are to get to the playoffs, but everything around doesn't say that. The Cardinals, they're not necessarily on a rebuild. They have an identity.
Mm-hmm.
On both sides. They just need some things on both sides. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust it. They have money. They have good draft picks, whatever they do with that. So it's just now they're just improving their identity, it's a good sign. So if you're a Cardinals fan, I'm not saying you should be super excited. I wouldn't expect to make it to the playoffs this year or anything. But I would see, especially in that division, but I would be expecting to see, maybe at least an 8-win season, possibly. I could definitely see that with Arizona.
Oh, I could see them being runners for a wild card. Because they weren't, they weren't bad last year. Getting to 8-8 is probably relatively easy, and then NFC is maybe the harder conference to get into the wild card, though. There's just so many good teams,
especially the NFC West when
Yeah, your division has the Seattle Seahawks with Russell Wilson. And, the 49ers and their macho defense, just insane.
And do not forget about the Rams, man.
Rams might take a return back to. I had questions about the Rams, though, man. I really do.
Oh, I have a lot of questions about them, but I'm just saying, they're not a walk in the park for anybody either.
No, and they showed and I will say this: McVay showed an ability to kind of bounce back last year. But again, I'm very interested in these two teams.
But one thing I did forget, Keyshawn Johnson was one guy we forgot to bring up who I was very impressed with.
Yes, another one of the receivers they drafted last year.
But also another thing too, when you get these coaches that come from college, and Kingsbury didn't necessarily light it up. He's not the name on everybody's tongue right now.
Yeah.
But he had success. Whenever anybody comes from college with a system from college, other coaches go to the college coaches saying, hey, what did you do to defend against this guy?
Yeah.
So they're probably talking to these big, because they're going to do the same thing for Lamar. I bet you, Belichick.
I think we've seen enough. I think we've seen a lot of people defending from Lamar. So that's the thing. I think the fact that we haven't seen an extreme amount of success for the Cardinals, I think they're going to be slept on a bit.
Yeah.
Compared to Baltimore, which everybody's probably going, all right, how do we stop them? Because we got to stop this juggernaut.
Yeah, I bet you every head coach in the AFC North is down there talking to Dabo Sweeney right now. Like, how do you defend against this? And to all these ACC coaches where that system's prevalent. And, so now it's going to be, okay, Harbaugh, you adjusted for Lamar once. What are you going to do this time? Because if you stick with the same guns and those guns start getting snuffed out, then...
Yeah. So, again, it's going to be interesting to see if anybody adapts to what they're doing. And the one thing I liked about Cliff Kingsbury, he didn't seem dedicated to like a specific thing. It was mostly horizontal passing, but
to supplant like a run game kind of too.
Yeah, but then they ended up getting good run games out of him. I mean, that Chase Edmonds game and the Kenyon Drake game against San Francisco, that was bananas.
Or when Chase Edmonds ran for 3 against the Giants.
Yeah.
But one thing, speaking of their run game, one thing a lot of people knock on him for was they want to see Kyler run more.
Yeah.
Because he's so good at it. He's one of the fastest quarterbacks in the NFL. But it's like you really have to, mitigate risk, do the potential benefits outweigh, the risk? Because he's small. He says he's 5'10", but he looks more like 5'8".
He's in the office right now. I have him
he's
hiding
right here.
Yeah. He can't actually make it up to the camera height.
So he's small, and like we already said, he slides or he runs out of bounds now to avoid hits. It's like, would you rather this guy pick up a first down, or would you rather him, miss 3 games? Let's.
Yeah. No, it makes sense to not overrun him, and we see it with Russell Wilson. They don't have to overrun Russell Wilson for him to be useful as a runner.
Russell Wilson's so much stockier than him, though, too. Same thing with Lamar. Lamar's neck is big, Kyler's
I don't know.
tiny.
I think he's the one out of those 3. If I'm thinking one of those guys is going to get injured sooner rather than later, it is Lamar, though.
Well, because he does take the most.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It doesn't matter how big you are. You saw with Cam Newton. Eventually, he wears down. Eventually, these guys that take the hits wear down.
Yeah, because it's an if, not when situation when it comes to the NFL about when your body can't take the hit or has to succumb to a hit. It happens to everyone. It's undefeated, but
Yeah. So again, both these teams, very interesting to see where they're going. Thanks for coming on again, and I love having them on here. Again, we needed the beautiful face back from the Draftvice, the Hall of Fame. So if you want, you can follow Shane at
the THEE_Shane_MCM.
You can follow me at Brojo Death Punch. You can follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. If you want, you can like the podcast if you're watching it on YouTube. You subscribe. Go find where it is on the iTunes or the Stitcher or whatever else you use, the Spotify. If you're on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, guess what? We also have a YouTube page. So you can go find it on there. Share it, like it, leave a review. Leave a comment, too, if you want.
We're on the same
When I
side.
woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.